If you've ever wanted to know how to install a GFI receptacle, I'm going to show you how. So I've got a black one here because this is what the customer wants. I know it's a little bit harder to see than if this was white, but this is a kitchen, so we're using the T slot. You can see that little slot on there, the T slot 20 amp receptacle. And according to Canadian electrical code, you can have 2 kitchen receptacles on one circuit, so maximum of 2 receptacles on one circuit. This is going to be my GFI receptacle right here. So there's 2 sets of wires coming in. One of them is the power coming in, one of them is the power going out. How do I know? Well, because when I roughed in this house, when I was pulling all the wiring, I typically make a notch. If you see my other videos, I typically make a notch on one set of wires, which is going to be my load. Okay, so this is my line, nothing on here. On my load, I don't know if you can kind of see, there's notches on there. Yeah, you can kind of see them there. So I've got notches on here. This indicates my load. So on the receptacle, you're going to see your line right there. It says line. Okay, those upper 2 screws, or I guess they're actually the lower screws if I face it this way. Okay, but so this is line right here. It says line. This is load. So my power coming in will go to the line side. My power going out to my next receptacle will go on the load side. And the reason is because the next receptacle is going to be installed on the side of this island here. It's not cut out yet. It's not there. They're still working on the cabinets, okay? But that second receptacle will be over here somewhere on the side of the island. And that's going to be my load. And the reason for it is because there's a sink over here. So because this receptacle is within 1.5 meters of that sink, it needs to be GFI protected. And because I'm going to be installing one of those kind of, I don't know, retrofit, whatever kind of boxes that slides in and kind of grabs with the brackets, because I'm going to be installing those. They're kind of slanted on the back, so the GFI is kind of, it's a big receptacle, it's kind of hard to fit it inside there. So I typically put a regular receptacle over here and I put the GFI one over here. Okay, so if for whatever reason something over here trips because of, you know, some appliance is plugged in, falls in the water, something like that, if this receptacle is GFI protected, it'll trip the one that's right over here. So to reset it, you'll have to press the button on this side to reset the receptacle that's on this side over here. Okay, so this one is GFI protected, that's the load receptacle, and this one is the actual GFI receptacle over here. So if I was to put the wire in and the wires out both on the line side, then only this receptacle would be protected by GFI, and the other one on the island wouldn't be because it's on the line side of this receptacle. Okay, so that's how that works. If you want the second receptacle protected, then you need to put it on the load side. So I'm just going to strip these, I don't know, maybe 1/2 inch or so, maybe 3/4 of an inch. I'm going to strip this, insert it in here, and one thing to remember is you kind of have to push these screws in when you're sliding the wire in, because if the screws are pushed out, the wire doesn't go in. You may be able to force it and then you tighten the screw, but the wire is going to come loose. Okay, so push these in and then slide the wire in, tighten up the screws. And one other thing that I want to mention, these notches I made here have now weakened this wire because, well, you know, they're notched, so now the wire is going to have like these, the copper will have notches in it. And if there's any movement inside the receptacle, like when I'm kind of folding the wire back in, if there's any movement, it could snap. Okay, so I always make a point of just remember which one, as I'm putting them in, you need to remember which one is your load, and typically I'll just cut these notches off. So I know that looking in the receptacle, the one at the top there is my line, and the one at the bottom here is my load. So I'm going to remember that, and then I'm going to cut these off to make sure that my copper that I'm putting into my receptacle over here doesn't have any notches on it. Okay, so I've put the wire into the back of the receptacle, and I'm using the Eaton brand of receptacles here. So one thing I've noticed is the line side on the Eaton GFI receptacle is always on the same side as the bonding screw at the bottom there, that green screw. So I typically remember I don't have to read it every single time. So same side as the bonding screw. This is my line side. And then on the top there's my load side. But you should probably read it unless you're always using the same brand, whatever, you should always read it anyways, because some brands might be line at the top and load at the bottom. So now the wires are terminated. Typically I give it a little tug to make sure they're in there nice and tight, like they're not going to come loose as soon as I move it. And I'm just going to fold them up in there, kind of like a accordion sort of. I just want to fold it up in there so that nothing is getting crushed or anything, and screw this in, and that's it. Okay, so the receptacle's installed. All right. Once I go around doing wall plates, I'll put the wall plate on, and that's what it's going to look like. Okay. But I guess one thing that I wanted to mention, a lot of times when you're working, when you're putting a receptacle over a tiled backsplash, or whatever, it could be like a whole slab or whatever it is, sometimes these screws might be too short. Okay, in this case they reached. In other cases I've had to get longer screws. So if that's the case, you just pull these screws out and just get some longer 632 screws. I think these ones are typically about 1 inch or so, but if you get like 1.5 inch screws, then usually they're going to work for almost every backsplash. So just a little tip, if they're too short, just get longer screws, and again 632 threads, and they'll work.